because I have quite a large stash of computers down here, test bench here, and then in my closet, I've got a bunch of computer cases, boxes, 1,650 watt power supply. Computer parts is not something I've got a small amount of, and I'm not making any money from this channel yet, and so for my computer hobby, I'm actually not making any profit, and it's getting really expensive to keep buying new computers and parts for videos. So what I'm going to do is go through some of my parts, build up some good PCs for flipping, and tell you, should you sell computers or flip computers? Is it profitable and is it worth it? Now, almost all of my computers are cheaper. I've got things like this AMD one here, but that's my test bench at the moment, and so most of my computers are cheaper computers. One of the first things I want to upgrade to flip is this Acer. I bought this Acer PC a little while ago. It's dusty now, so it needs a dust off, but I got it for only $50, and I got it for a video to see if a $50 computer was a good idea. What I want to do is do some upgrading and then flip it for a bit more than $50. Let's upgrade it. This is the Acer machine. She's not a bad looking machine at all by any means, actually. I don't mind it, but it's currently got a Core i5 in there, 3rd gen. It has 0 storage at the moment and a very wimpy old graphics card. So we've got a little bit to do here, because it's also got 8 gigabytes of RAM, but I want to pull that up to 16. Oh, actually, no, I might leave it at 8. But first, I'm going to pop out this graphics card holder and pull out this old graphics card by Manly. That's not a brand I've heard of before. A GT210. But, interestingly, this power supply has already got a 6+2 and a 6-pin connector, which is very good. Because into this, I'm going to chuck in a graphics card that's not crazy, but should be more than adequate for this machine. I'm chucking in this MSI card, which is an AMD R9 380. It's a 4 gig card, but for a 3rd gen i5, it should be more than enough. And for budget gaming, it's a great machine. Assuming, actually, now I'm looking at it, it's going to fit. If I can get it around the lip, I think it'll be fine. So we've made a little bit of progress. Not a lot, but a little bit. Okay. Okay. It took a lot of shoving and a lot of jamming, but I was right. It's in, and it's gonna work, I think. I take out the CPU cooler. A lot of effort. It took me a good half an hour to sort it, and I'm not gonna be able to use this green thing again because of the graphics card, but hypothetically, theoretically, it should now work. Now I've just gotta hope it works, because if it doesn't, I'm screwed. But I don't see any reason it shouldn't. I've decided I'm going to leave the RAM as it is. Let's get a little bit more thermal paste on there, repaste it, and chuck on the CPU cooler. And chuck on some MX4. For our storage in this system, I've got a Patriot Burst 120GB SSD as the boot drive, as well as a 250GB hard drive for a little bit of bulk storage, because this is a budget machine. I'm not wanting to put massive drives in it. Generally, if people are looking for a cheaper computer, storage is not a massive concern for them, the amount. And I think that's the system configured, and we've just got to chuck it on some power and make sure it's still working. If it is, I'm going to do some quick benchmarking for it and set a price. Okay, got it plugged into power. So now if I hit the power switch, that's where something is supposed to happen. Oh, I didn't plug the 24 pin back in. That would do it. Okay, take 2. Oh, here we go. We've got lights, but it works. It works. It all works. Let's install Windows and some benchmarking and quickly benchmark this computer. So first of all, I ran some benchmarks on 3D Mark, with the first one being Time Spy, in which we got a pretty appropriate result. Not bad, kind of what exactly was expected. After that, I also ran CPU Profile again on 3D Mark, which is a purely CPU based benchmark, and the score was, again, pretty adequate. Not an amazing score, but pretty good. I then ran some games, like the Steam version of the original Doom, which ran at an average of 240 FPS, which is a lot. But that can run on pretty much anything. I usually use that more to show that it's a half decent machine at all. But next, of course, we've got Portal 2, which similarly ran at about 200 FPS average and ran fairly well with the 1% lows not getting too far down as well. Then I ran Assassin's Creed Unity, in which it dipped down a little bit, but with the settings turned a little bit lower, it probably could have gotten a little bit higher, with an average of about 50 FPS, but the 1% lows did get pretty low, and you could definitely feel them while playing. If you turn down the settings, I'm sure it would probably be a bit better and fine, but something like Assassin's Creed Unity is the upper limit, so we couldn't play something like Cyberpunk on this machine. Now with that, I've run all the tests, as you know. Now let's talk about the actual selling of it. I got this main desktop for $50 AUD. The graphics card I got as a bulk lot. I got a bulk lot for about $100, and that was in it. And I'll tell you, there was a lot more than $100 worth of stuff in there. So that was basically free because I've already sold a few other things. The SSD I bought in bulk. I bought 10 120GB SSDs for this exact reason. So that was like 13 AUD. The hard drive I got for 10 AUD. And while there is a cooling problem I'm going to have to fix, because the GPU got a little toasty there, which I half suspect. In total, I got that entire system for about 73 AUD dollars. I'll have USD on the screen. I'm going to list it for 400 AUD, obviously in negotiations and stuff. So I estimate it'll sell for about 350 AUD, which is a massive profit. Admittedly, I did a lot of bargain hunting for this, like a lot, but even still, it's a massive jump and a nice chunk of change. So I'm going to take some product photos and then I'll work on another system. For the next computer we're working on, we've got to move on to the computer closet. I've got a bunch of cases and computers in here, and I'm pulling out this bad boy. This computer is one I built a little while ago as a challenge when I got a bunch of bulk parts. With this one, I want to talk about something interesting. This computer is not at all a looker. The other computer wasn't amazing looking, but it was pretty good. This one's in an old pre-built case, and it's just not amazing looking, which sucks, but oh well. One of the best things to do if you're going to flip a PC is move it to a prettier case. I've got options like this Thermaltake one, or if I wanted to get really bougie, I've got this one, which I think is still Thermaltake, but it has a glass side panel and stuff. Though, because this one is, again, a low-end machine, generally the lower end your machine is, the more you'll get away with things like the appearance and the looks of the machine. Because this is a lower-end machine, generally the aesthetic is lower on the priorities list. So I'm not going to switch it out of this case, mainly because I kind of want to get rid of the case. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind: the higher end of the machine, the better looking people will want it to be. And the easier it will be to sell, the better looking it is. Okay, some people might recognize this build. Oh, my cat's... Say hi to the camera, cat. My cat's being really disruptive. Some people might recognize this build, because I built this one on camera again. That'll be a common theme. It already has 8 gigs of RAM and a half-decent Xeon CPU, but this one I built with a really bad graphics card on purpose, because that was part of the challenge, building a computer with only the bulk parts. And there's 2 major things I gotta do here. Number 1, chuck a half-decent graphics card in it. Number 2, chuck an SSD in it, because it's currently running on a hard drive. Number 3, chuck any sort of ventilation in it, because I don't think it's got any fans in it at the moment, except for like the CPU and graphics card fan. The graphics card we're going to chuck back in it is this. This is a GTX 1050. It's an ITX card, so it's actually been quite helpful for some builds, but it's the only card I've got lying around that's a similar level that I would want it to be. I also want to chuck some PCI brackets in there, because that's currently very open, and also grab my SSD. We have now got some PCI brackets in, just to fill the space. I put in another fan, which had a really short thing, so I put in this, which while it is a fan controller, I just used it to extend it. I'll zip tie that away in a second. This case doesn't actually have space for a 2.5-inch drive, and so I'm using this metal adapter. I've just got to attach this in, and then hopefully it should boot up and post still. With that, I think we're set. She's all plugged in. We do have a power LED. Does she spin to life? Yes, she does. She rapidly doesn't spin to life anymore. And we're back. And we're not. So, it has now been a few days. I had to stop recording and working on it because I got sick for a little bit. But I've been working on it a bit, and quite bluntly, this computer, if I turn it on, it just keeps boot cycling. And I've switched it back to the old config that worked when I tested it. I've switched the graphics card, the RAM, reseated the CPU. I think it's the motherboard, but I don't have a spare one lying around. But this does allow me to talk about one interesting thing. Generally, if you're doing PC flipping, you're buying second-hand parts and older parts and all that sort of stuff, which, one, if you don't test it before you leave, could just flat out not work. And 2, even though I had this computer running, it's usually older, not going to last as long, and doesn't have things like a warranty. So I'm not going to be able to sell that computer now because it's just not working. And that's a fair chunk of cash I'm not going to be able to go collect now. It's a big thing with computer flipping that you will have a lot of losses like that. You'll be really careful about what you buy and use for your flips. And especially because when you sell a computer to anyone, everything that happens to it afterwards, even if it's not your fault, you'll be blamed for. Those are things to consider when getting a computer. I'm going to ride that computer off for the time being. I might come into a new motherboard one day soon, but for the time being, I'm just writing it off as dead. But moving on to the last PC I want to talk about and tinker with to sell. It is this Acer PC that once again has been on the channel before, running an A10 quad-core processor, which means it has 2 cores and 4 threads. The graphics card is kind of not good. I believe it's also the RAM gutted out of it. So let's open her up, see what we've got in here, and get it ready to sell. So this one I didn't record the process of the upgrades, as I made some very basic ones. All I did was chucked 8 gigs of DDR3 RAM in, 1600 megahertz. I didn't actually end up touching the GPU. CPU is fine as well. I took out the 2TB hard drive because quite bluntly, it's not a bad hard drive and I'm going to plan to use it for a different project. And I instead put in a 120GB SSD, especially because an SSD just overall will benefit this machine a lot. I thought about and tried putting things like a GPU and stuff in, but honestly, I thought about changing other things like the GPU and at one point even like slotted it in, but never ended up booting it because I thought about it and just wasn't going to provide that much benefit just because the CPU is already not great. But now's as good a time to test as any. Does she boot? She spins to life. Got a signal. I'm going to have to go reinstall Windows because installing Windows on this is a pain. I talked about it in this video, but it doesn't have standard boot settings or UEFI settings on the motherboard on this computer. And so you can't just plug in a standard Windows boot USB. You've got to go reformat it. If you want to learn about that, watch this video here. But I'm going to go install Windows and then benchmark it. So I started benchmarking the machine, again with 3D Mark, starting off with TimeSpy, in which the scores are pretty much what was expected. The graphics score was a little bit lower than the CPU score this time, but that was on purpose, and I'm going to get into that very soon. I also ran the CPU profile again, and again the scores were a lot lower, but pretty much what I expected. Upon running the Steam version of the original Doom, it got on average about 120 FPS, which is half of what the first PC got, which is not a lot of FPS for this game. And we also ran Portal 2, which averaged at between 30 and 40 FPS, which is still not great at all. And then Assassin's Creed Unity, which averaged about 10 FPS. And something I've noticed about this machine as well, the response time is very slow, and the 1% lows are a lot lower. So, overall, it's not an amazing gaming machine. It can play some light games, but it's not amazing for gaming, which is why I don't plan to market it as a gaming machine. I'm just going to market it as a desktop computer and sell it for a bit less. So I got this computer for 40 bucks, but the computer came with some other stuff, so I'm going to round it down to about 30, 25. Let's go 25. The RAM I got for 5 bucks at an op shop. The SSDs, again, I bought in bulk for about 15 bucks. So it's about a $50 for a computer, which is not bad at all. I'm intending to list it for $200 online. I'm expected to get negotiated down. I reckon I'll get down to about $150. That's still a 200% profit. I've just got to be careful about how I market it. But the only thing with this one is, as I said, I had to do stuff with the Windows. I had to check a few things because it was a pre-built. It had a lot. This one specifically had a lot of compatibility issues. That's another thing about flipping computers not many people talk about. If you're not just buying and then reselling, if you're fixing, tinkering, you need to know what you're doing. This isn't just build a computer, this is fixing it, this is upgrading, this is understanding it. You might be able to do the basics like upgrade the GPU and whatnot, like I did in the first one, if you only know the basics. But I bought this machine basically in an unworking condition and have worked it back up. You need that knowledge and understanding of the machine. So overall, final conclusion, should you flip computers? Yes and no. Let's go through them one at a time. The first one was pretty easy with no major issues and was very basic. It was just chucking in a GPU, chucking in an SSD, the very basic. From that first machine, I'm actually going to make a fair bit of profit too. Of course, the second machine didn't even work, which is frustrating because I tested it before I started filming, then I changed the GPU, stopped working, switched the GPU back, still not working. I think it's the motherboard, but that was a loss. And the third one we'll make some money off of. We won't make as big a profit as the first one. We'll make a fair chunk of change from the third one as well. So for my conclusion, should you flip PCs? Yes, if you understand a few things. I do computers more as a hobby and an interest. I don't do it for profit. I like to make some money back on occasion so I can buy new computers and new parts to work with, but I'm not out for a profit. I'm out as a hobby. So I don't see the second computer not working as a loss per se. If you're out for a profit, you've got to fit a few very specific requirements. One, be in a very good area for it. If you're in any sort of rural area or anything like that, not gonna be able to do it for the most part. Number two, you have to not just be able to build a PC, but understand how to fix them, upgrade them, all that sort of stuff. For the most part, in order to flip computers successfully, you've got to buy secondhand, and at times you've got to buy like cheap, not quite working computers and fix them up and stuff like that. You have to, at bare minimum, understand how to build a computer and how it all works, and I recommend knowing how to fix it and having some experience. And the third one is understanding how to find a good deal with computers. I've been doing this for a while now. I can spot a good deal. I know a few tips and tricks, like some Xeons are surprisingly good for gaming still, even though they're older CPUs and server CPUs. But just because it says Xeon or i5 doesn't mean it is a gaming CPU. they can still be quite bad. There are things like that to understand. But if you think you fit all those criteria and you understand that it's more of a side hustle than it is going to be a full-time job, I would be very surprised if many people made enough money for a full-time job, then yeah, it's a good idea. I've made a little bit of change off of it, and it's nice to have that extra cash around. It allows me to buy new parts, new resources for the videos. Like I got the new microphones a while ago. A few other options, which I didn't really touch on in this video, is you can also get people to commission you for builds, which is definitely something I've done in the past, where they'll give you a budget, you set out their parts and build it with them or for them. All that sort of stuff. That's also a very good option to make money off of computers. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this deep dive as to whether you should or shouldn't sell computers and whether that's something you should get into. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. I'm a small creator, it would help out a ton. I'm trying to grow the channel at the moment. Comment down below some of the best tech bargains you've gotten, as well as if you want to see me cover any certain things, like certain parts or do certain challenges, because I do a bunch of different tech stuff. I'll have some end screens for a video that was recommended to you, whatever my latest video is, as well as one of the videos that talks about one of the computers I'm actually selling in this one. Subscribing is only one button, helps out a ton. Make sure to check out other videos by me as well. Everyone says to subscribe, but of course, you need to maintain engagement, and you can always watch more videos, it helps out a ton. I hope I see you in the next one, and bye-bye.